Alright, hey everyone, my name's Nick and this is a Sober Method. So today I wanted to talk about anxiety. I'm going to try to knock it out in about 30 minutes. I don't have a whole lot of time because I got class, but essentially this is going to be more about the causes of anxiety. And you could throw depression in here as well with this same thing, but keep that in mind. But I'm mainly going to use the word anxiety, okay? So for anxiety, this is going to be more of the causes and some of the reasons why those can cause us anxiety, not so much the solution part. So solutions will be the next video. So anxiety is a big part for a lot of people of why they use, but also just their discomfort in general. Maybe you know somebody that has anxiety that doesn't use drugs or alcohol. Maybe that person is you, but it's something I have a lot of personal experience with. The last 7 years have been marked by a substantial amount of anxiety, and it's probably one of the biggest challenges I've had to deal with in my life. It is something that can absolutely steal your joy and make every moment can be tainted. Every moment is, you're not able to be fully present. Your life is getting stolen from you by this just marked sense of unsurety or helplessness feeling or worry or dread, and it really just puts a kind of a stain on our experience. And so I'm well versed in this because of that reason, and I wanted to find solutions and ways out of it. So I learned a lot of stuff, and I'm gonna try to share it with you now. So once again, that feeling of uncertainty, worry, helplessness, but also those are the feelings. But it's just your body, your brain is is detecting a threat. It thinks there's a threat in the room when sometimes there actually is, and sometimes there isn't. Okay, and a lot of times people may think they have anxiety disorder, but actually there's perfectly valid reasons why they're experiencing this anxiety, and it's not a disorder. Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. But first and foremost, if someone comes to me and says, I'm experiencing a lot of anxiety, the first thing I'm going to ask is, well, tell me about the people in your life. So if the people that you're hanging around, that you're with a lot, are unsupportive, unhelpful, toxic, negative, abusive, then I think it makes perfect sense why you would have anxiety. And in that case, of course, we don't need to know breathing techniques and better ways to cope with anxiety. We need to get these people out of our lives or set boundaries. And if we don't have strong boundaries, then that's another thing that can give us a lot of anxiety, like our people pleasers. So if we are always putting other people's needs ahead of our own, then our needs get pushed to the back burner, and we're going to get those protest behaviors, one of which can be anxiety. It's something crying out saying, hey, pay attention to me, I need some help, I need some support, right? I'm being neglected and I'm atrophying, you know? So we need to sometimes connect with that part and not always neglect ourselves, because we can only do that for so long before we start to become dismantled. First, another say really basic underlying thing that can be the case for anxiety is a nutrient deficiency. So say, take this guy, he came to the treatment center one time. He said he had chronic depression, and so he got on a bunch of SSRIs, and his doctors, it wasn't working, so his doctors kept giving him more SSRIs, upping the dosage, trying different ones, until eventually he got serotonin syndrome. Well, he ended up going to the hospital, and he went to a different doctor, and this doctor did further tests, and he found out that he because he was an alcoholic, he wasn't processing vitamin B's correctly, and so they started giving him vitamin B injections, and his depression almost instantly evaporated. And so that was a perfect example of how sometimes, we jump to these more severe causes, like a lack of serotonin um, issues for anxiety and depression, when really it can be as simple as our nutrition. I mean, that's food, water, shelter is as basic as it gets. I mean, if we don't have shelter, then maybe it is right to feel anxiety so that we will mobilize and find shelter, right? Otherwise, we'll be cool, calm, and collected, and happy as a cucumber out in the rain where we could get sick and have other issues. So anxiety is really there to try to help serve us. I know it's uncomfortable. I know it's something we wish we didn't feel ever at all, but if we didn't, we'd be dead. Okay? So nutrient deficiency, we'll talk too about the types of nutrients that we need to get for alleviation of anxiety, as well as some supplements that help. Also, eating enough and hydration. If we're not eating enough food, then the anxiety response, the threat response the cortisol will increase, so that we will mobilize and find food. Okay. All right. Shame. I want to throw shame, trauma, and chronic stress kind of in the same category, mainly because shame and trauma go hand in hand. I don't really know of a case where there was trauma and this person had PTSD and didn't experience any amount of shame. I don't think I've ever seen that. Shame is one of the most difficult things for a person to feel, and a lot of times it can come from a negative core beliefs. And one of those negative core beliefs can be that I am helpless, that I don't have any power at all over what happens to me. And of course this would make us feel anxious, because we're probably thinking that something bad's going to happen to us. Also, shame is very isolating, and if we're feeling isolated, then of course, once again, we're going to feel anxious. It's another form of, thousands of years ago, if you were alone in the jungle, you needed to be anxious, because that was a very dangerous situation to be in. And so you would need to mobilize and find your tribe. You need to find some people where you were safer. Trauma and chronic stress. So essentially, maybe you've heard of like the sympathetic side and the parasympathetic side of your nervous system. Your sympathetic side being your fight or flight, your parasympathetic, your rest and digest, sympathetic, the gas, parasympathetic, the brakes. If we are in a unprocessed trauma or a situation where we're in chronic stress for years, then we can get stuck in this sympathetic nervous system side to where we are always on. And sometimes it doesn't always look like you are hyper vigilant and super shy or scared acting all the time. It can just even be like a sense of restlessness. I can't stop. I have to go, right? Until I'm just so completely exhausted, I have to then lay down. Probably have trouble sleeping at night and all that stuff too. I hope that's not interrupting too much. I don't know what they're doing. But we need to learn how to regulate. We need to learn how to shift from that sympathetic side to the parasympathetic side. When it comes to trauma, if we can alleviate the shame and we can shift from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic and strengthen that connection with that, you're going to start to see like trauma symptoms go down. And if I'm not having trauma symptoms anymore, then is it safe to say that my trauma is probably healed or in the process of being healed? Yeah, I'd say that's safe to say. Catastrophizing. So catastrophizing isn't necessarily like a cause of anxiety, but more so something that will contribute to it and exacerbate it. A lot of times it's making, you can think of it like making mountains out of molehills. So if I say I have chest pain because of my anxiety, because sometimes chest tightness is a symptom of anxiety, and then I say, think it's a heart attack, right? So that's me catastrophizing, me going from maybe it's something, I feel this sensation and it's the worst case scenario, right? Me having a heart attack, I'm about to die, and that's catastrophizing. And then of course that's just going to exacerbate the anxiety more, which means we're going to get more chest pain, and then we're going to be running to the hospital, but they're going to tell us that we're fine, that our heart's okay, 9 times out of 10. So catastrophizing also could look like, say, I call my spouse 4 or 5 times, she doesn't pick up, and I think she's either dead in a ditch somewhere or she's cheating on me, right? Those are two concerns that a lot of people have with their spouse, and probably the worst case scenario for a lot of people, and so our mind jumps right there. And then it's just your mind, once again, trying to protect you, trying to say, if I can predict the worst case scenario, then that means I can defend against it or prevent it from happening. But most of the time, that's not true. Most of the time, this stuff is outside of our control. And so, it's just another way our brain is trying to, it's this huge cognitive feat that I don't think really many other creatures can do, can imagine in such ways and into the future. But it comes at a big emotional cost. And that emotional cost is the anxiety, the dread, the pain. So catastrophizing is one of those cognitive distortions that just exasperates our suffering. Okay. Suppressed grief. So this actually can be a cause for anxiety. A lot of emotions that are suppressed, like if it's anger, can be coming up as anxiety, but especially grief, because grief is so powerful. Grief is one of those things that, right there along with shame, is probably two of the most difficult things that we experience as humans. And so what it can look like, I'll give you an example. CEO comes to Max Strom. It was a story he shared about the CEO who came to him, and he told him that he started experiencing panic attacks. And Max asked him, when did you start experiencing these? He said 6 months ago. So he said, well, what happened 6 months ago? He said, my brother died. And he said, and he said, you went right back to work after your funeral, didn't you? He said, yeah, I sure did. He said, you don't have an anxiety problem, you have a grief problem. You never grieved the death of your brother. And so he started to try to connect with that pain and feel that pain and express that pain, express that loss, and understand the full weight of it, and experience that. And within probably a month, it was, his panic attack subsided. He was grieving, he was feeling that pain, but once again, this is the body sending messages to try to say, hey, there's something you need to pay attention to. There's something you need to process or look at or change. And we don't want to feel uncomfortable. We don't want to feel pain. It would be much nicer, I suppose, if we could love somebody deeply and they pass, and then we just, like, well, it was good knowing them while it lasted, off to work or wherever we're going, but we don't get love without pain. It's part of the deal. You get to experience something as magical and wonderful as love, and then that means we also have the flip side of the coin when that love goes away. If we lose it, whether it be through death or divorce or anything, even them a person moving away, like a great friend that you had and they have to move away, we can experience a type of grief. But if we don't allow ourselves to feel it, then that suppressed emotion, you can kind of think of it like a fish factory. So the fish are coming in. There's your situations in your life, that the emotions that we need to process due to those situations, and we're processing the fish as they come into the factory. But then the big fish comes, and we say, well, that's a little bigger than I'm ready to handle right now. Let's put it off to the side. And so then over time, if we never go back and process that fish, what happens to it? It starts to rot. It starts to fester and get smelly and nasty. And that's the same thing with our emotions. They'll start to come up in uglier and painful ways when they're suppressed. You wouldn't, if you told a person to suppress happiness, told a person not to laugh ever, if something was funny, that don't ever laugh because that's weakness, then you would find a very miserable person. Probably would experience some anxiety as well. It's the same thing when it comes to things like crying. If you're told never to cry, or you feel like it's embarrassing, or you try not to do that for whatever reason, maybe you're scared that if I start crying, I'll never stop. But whatever the reason is, it's the same kind of thing. If we don't express those emotions, then we'll suffer. We'll get suffering to come up. And most of the time, really, I mean, crying is so, I think it's baptismal in a way. It's so cleansing. I've read where there's cortisol in our tears, and we talk about cortisol, the stress hormone, and our body needs to process it, needs to get out that extra stress, so we have the function, the ability to cry, to shed the cortisol out. But we get in our own way. Another thing that gets in our own way is just that, I guess it's all tied together with the shame and the suppression. We get in our own way for processing so much because we don't want to be embarrassed. We don't want to be, we don't want to put ourselves out there. We don't want to demonstrate what we would perceive as weakness. But it's a type of strength to be able to be authentic and not hide and wear the mask all the time. At some point, we have to take the mask off and be authentic. And once in a while, that anxiety is there, once again, just to say something, tell us something like, hey, you haven't been authentic in a long, long time, and you need to be. And so we're going to send you messages, right? The body sends you messages in the form of anxiety so that you can start to change and live more fully if we are willing to pay attention to it. All right, of course, withdrawal, if you're in the first 3 months, maybe even 6 months of recovery, you just got sober, it's not unusual to still be experiencing some type of withdrawal. I know the physical part only lasts for like a week or two, but the mental and emotional part can last a lot longer. I mean, really, they say it takes about a year for your brain to kind of get homeostasis again after a bout of addiction. Maybe longer, depending on how long your use was and the amount you were using. In this case, we're just going to have to be patient, do the things that help us to get through. It won't last forever. I know, like, we like to think, I've been sober for a month. Why am I not happy? Why am I still, like, feeling all this stuff, A big part of getting sober and staying sober is connecting with ourselves, feeling uncomfortable feelings, right? It's especially if we've been numb for a long time from our use, we got a lot of stuff to catch up on with processing. And so the first year can be a roller coaster, but it gets better, okay? We're going to have to be patient a little bit. All right, so say now we have checked all these boxes. Every one of these boxes has been checked. I have maybe gotten solutions for every single one of these. I've changed my people, places, and things. I've healed my shame and my trauma. I've regulated my nervous system. I express the grief I need to express. Like, I'm doing all these different things, and I still experience these anxiety symptoms. Well, then maybe it could be a type of underlying health disorder. And I don't mean we did all these things for a week. Like, if it was months of we feel strong in all these areas, then maybe then it's something that we need to get checked out by a doctor. Or maybe you actually do have what they would, in the truest sense of the word, an anxiety disorder. In which case, certain medications we have available that can help. So we're right here at 20 minutes. I guess I knocked it out faster than I thought, but these are some of the main causes that I've seen for anxiety. And if there's any more that I left out as far as reasons to that you feel anxious, please put in the comments. Help educate me, because I'm trying to help as well. And yeah, so the next video we're going to do all about solutions to each one of these, every trick that I know. All right.